Okay, I'd like to welcome you to this, the third in the spring lecture series in Asian Studies. Our speaker today is Qingshan Tan, who received his PhD in political science from Emory. And I just learned today that he is a member of the class of '77. I don't know how much significance that would have for you, but in China, that's a very, very exceptional class. First of all, that's in China, they indicate class by the year of entry. So he was a freshman in 1977. And the class of '77 was, how to call it, as you know, you get into college by taking a university entrance, not a university, a nationwide examination system. And the exams had not been given in China for almost 10 years. So it was a huge class of people who, 10-year backup of people who took the exams for entrance in '77. And many of those folks who did so were exceptionally successful later. So I'm really pleased that we were able to get, as one of our speakers, a member of that 1977 class from Beijing Foreign Language Institute. He also earned his master's degree from the Beijing Institute of International Relations before coming to the US and to Emory. As you probably know from our publicity, Professor Tan is at Cleveland State University in political science. His research interests include comparative politics with an emphasis on East Asian and Chinese politics. He also is interested in international relations with an emphasis on the political economy of development, foreign policy, and Sino-US relations. So he will be talking today on the topic of village elections and governance in China.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. It's very nice of you to mention that part of the history seemed to be a long time ago. Today's topic is the village elections and governance. I don't know how many of you have paid attention to the recent development in the Chinese villages. And I happen to shift my study on time to look into those rural development in the mid-1990s. That was when there is a beginning of academic focus on the village development. And I served as advisor to the Carter Center's China project when we went to China, established the village election project in China. And I was on the Carter Center delegation to observe the Chinese village elections several times. And this was the accumulation of my observations, studies, and research that wrote a book on the Chinese village elections. This is the cover of that book. Now, the village elections actually was in some way, the outgrowth of the end of the Cultural Revolution. When Deng Xiaoping came out, he decided to abolish the communes. And so when the communes were abolished, there was no administration below township level. So there is a power vacuum actually appeared. And that was the background against which village elections were experimented in the early 1980s. We'll talk about the history in a moment. But I think the village elections and village self-government are really the most significant political development in recent years in the Chinese countryside. When it started in the 1980s, almost there was no foreign attention paid to that. And it was indigenously grown kind of political development. It was not until mid-1990s when the Carter Center actually went in and started to report the village elections that the world attention began to turn on the village elections. Ever since then, it became well-studied political development in China. So what is a village election? Well, basically, a village election is an election of a village committee, which was a self-autonomous organization. It was not part of the government administrative structure. The lowest level of government administrative structure actually is the township government. Below township, there is no official government administration. So instead, village committees became the governing body of villages. I don't know how many of you know the history of the commune system. It was almost like the brigade level under the commune. The village committee was very similar to that, the brigade administration due to the commune system. We are talking about roughly, at the time we went in, it was like 1 million villagers. Now it has been merged and reduced to 700,000 villagers. And now we have actually village elections every 3 years. It has been conducted nationwide. All 30 provinces now have all the village elections. Some provinces have more advanced, more rounds, regular village elections. Other provinces, like Tibet, for example, didn't start the village elections until quite late. So up to date, actually, all the provinces have conducted at least a couple of rounds of village elections. Now let's look at the historical backgrounds against which village elections were implemented. As I said, the first reason was this decommunization effect on the countryside, which left a power vacuum. So there's no village management and administration. So what happened that most of the villagers were left loose, particularly after the family responsibility system was implemented, when the farmers were given the land to farm on their own. So they had to attend their own matters. So what used to be like a collective work, such as irrigations, such as the cultivation of public land and forestation, have been left unattended. Villagers, apart from attending their own work, a lot of villagers actually went into gambling, fighting, a lot of social problems. Actually, we visited one of those villagers. Let's see. This is the place where what they call the Xiaogangcun. This is the village where this family responsibility system was initially instituted in this village. And this is the village exhibition hall in which you can see this particular certificate. Actually, this is the first contract letter done by 18 household members at the time in 1979, when they secretly, that was before the decommunization, when they secretly decided to distribute the land as a contract to the individual household to farm, rather than farm collectively under the commune system. So 18 household members signed this contract to say at the end of the year, they're going to give the commune certain amount of grains. You know, that's the first contract. So, and this is known as the first village that led to the decommunization in China. And this person was one of the 18 signers. So I interviewed him about this village, and this is one of the reasons why later these village elections were conducted. Also, there's a deteriorating social orders, particularly in places where villagers have what they call the clan conflicts historically. You know, these clans were historically they will either have a bigger surname that will try to take the land away from the small groups, small clans. And that was quite actually widespread at that time. So I went to Guangxi province called Hezhai village, Hezhai-cun, and interviewed two of these original village officials who decided to take the village governance into their own hands. That was in 1980, before the decommunization. These two people who called on the households in the village to have elections, saying that, with the commune system not working anymore, let's elect our own village governing body. So later, this village became what they call the first election village in China. That was in the 1980s. And Mr. Wei became the first elected village chief. Now, this election was, at the time, by no means close to the Western universal one-man, one-vote, secret ballot kind of voting system. Instead, they had what they call household elections. Everybody just put up their hands, and they had the meeting in the camphor tree in front of the village. And that was how the first election was conducted. But nevertheless, I was very impressed with this, this village, which later really initiated this village elections, which were finally endorsed by the party. One of the major endorser of the village election was President Peng Zhen. He was the president of the NPR, National People's Congress, who decided to draft a law. It's called the Organic Law on Villages Committees, in which they decided to experiment on the village elections throughout the country. So when we were first actually went into China to observe the village elections, it was still under this experimental organic law, which was not officially promulgated until 1998. The other thing about this village election was the effort of the bureaucratic players who, for example, from the Ministry of Civil Affairs, who pushed for this village elections and decided to take the experiments from one place to other places. One of the particular bureaucratic player, his name is Zhan Chengfu. People may ask why bureaucratic players wanted to push for village elections. Well, let me just give you this personal example. This person, Mr. Zhan Chengfu, who was the counterpart when the Carter Center went to China. He was the one who was, was receiving the Carter Center and showing Carter Center team throughout the country to watch those village elections. He at that time was a division deputy within the Ministry of Civil Affairs. By the time the village elections became worldly known, he was rapidly promoted to the department head. Now he was one of those young upstarts in the Civil Affairs Ministry to be promoted probably to the ministerial level. He was a very young person at that time when we met him. But this is what they call the bureaucratic, accomplishment in that particular village self-government. Now, how village elections are conducted? Well, usually the Ministry of Civil Affairs was responsible for supervising the national elections, but the actual conduct of elections were rested with the provincial Bureau of Civil Affairs. They play a provincial role in implementing elections. What they did is that the officials from the Civil Affairs Bureau will go down to the county. And from county, they will select certain townships. And from certain townships, they will select certain villages and villages to conduct the elections. And what happened is that at the village level, they will initially elect what they call the election commission. And here is very interesting, almost no exception. Most of the village election chair was the village party chair, committee chair. He would then select village election commission members. And then they will conduct what they call the voter registration and setting up the election date. Here's the you can see that This is a list of voters who registered to vote, who are eligible to vote here. And here, after that, they will conduct the, what they call primary elections to nominate the candidates. Now, the nomination candidates, from what we observed, actually were quite democratic. The law specifically banned the organizational nomination, which means the party committee cannot nominate anyone, nor could township government. Instead, nomination would have to come from individuals, either individually joined nominating one person or self-nomination. So because of that, the nomination process led to this outcome of the candidates, which I think usually more reflecting a democratic will of the villagers. You can see there are, and by the way, it's multi-candidate election. So it's not the one person, one position, and you can select anyone from this group of list. This is the election in Jiangxi province that I visited. And the other thing, later they experimented with regard to nomination process, because they really, there are a lot of academic criticisms saying that the nomination is very open to manipulation, particularly by the township government. So in Lishu, Jining province, they decided to experiment on this, what they call the Haishuan nomination process. Basically, it is a nomination process in which everyone can write on a piece of paper a nominee and then send it to the election commission. So the Haishuan process later became a secret nominating process that no one can really interfere in that sense. And today, the Haishuan nomination became almost standard nomination process throughout the countryside. Once the candidates came out, the election date set, they will actually have what they call the one-day election. Now, there are two forms of elections in China. One is what they call the organized election meetings. So where all the villagers will call on to the either schoolyard or, or in the open. Everyone would line up according to village small groups. They all sit there and have what they call the election mobilization. And after the election mobilization, then everyone will cast their vote one by one into the booth. So you can see here, this is a election I observed in Yunnan province, in which they actually line up on this. You can see each line here. The Yunnan, I guess, is very high altitude, a lot of sunshine. People just use the umbrella to block the sunshine here. But you can see that each of the village small group has a ballot box here. You can see that. And this is a very popular, this meeting style election is very popular in the north. In the south, there's another form of election, that is the individual election. What they will do is individually will just go to the ballot boxes and cast the box at their own will. So the election runs from 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody can just go there at their free time. And unlike the meeting style election. And after the election, there's an open count. So it's not like before, they would just take the boxes and just into the party office and start sorting out the ballot. Instead, they actually on the spot, they'll sort out the ballots and start counting the ballots. And this is a typical Chinese way of counting ballots. They will write this letter called a zheng. Each of this character represents 5 votes because there are 5 strokes there. Right? So this is the way they're counting each one. And after the counting, they will on the spot announce who actually win the election. So it's a very open count and transparent process in that sense. It's not like you take the ballot boxes and announce the candidate the next day. Usually at the election meeting, at the end of the election, the township officials will give the candidate a certificate saying you are elected as the village chair from when to when. So there's a simple certificate issued by the county or the township government. Now, there are various issues with regard to the elections. I mean, when we actually went to China to observe the village elections, there are a lot of ways of elections. Particularly, we were very much concerned about the democratic procedures of elections, like the secret ballot, secret booth. These are the two most, I think, important factors in free and fair elections. And yet, in the Chinese countryside, most of the peasants do not realize these two important procedures. Nor do they care. So what happened is that you can see the whole families would put their heads together and discuss who they're going to vote for. We observed many times on this. So later, one of the delegates, who's the leader of the delegation, Robert Pastor, mentioned this to the election officials who accompanied us, saying that if you conduct the election that will be up to international standard, you really should have a secret procedural guarantee so that people can really cast their vote and nobody knows who they are voted for in a secret booth. I remember we talked to them on this in Jilin province, and our next stop is the election in Liaoning province the next day. So the next day, we went to Liaoning and tried to observe the election. We already saw that the election officials have separated the election booth, usually it's a table, and put the cardboard on each of these tables so that they only allow one person into the room and enter into this cardboard separated voting booth to vote. And we were actually quite impressed by the way they learned this very fast. So actually today, the secret booth voting procedure has been written into the new law in 1998. Now, all of these were the inputs of the foreign observers. So in a sense, that election they try to adopt those international standards and introduce them to the village elections. I recently have studied the election issues and then was asked to make some suggestions because they are now revising the law again this year to see whether there are some other things that can improve. One of the things actually I put forth is whether they can synchronize the election dates. Because from what I studied, we observed that election dates almost varied from township to township. So there is no election even county-wide, let alone provincial-wide or nationwide. One of my arguments is that I think if we really have a synchronized election date, let's say a province have one day for all rural election, imagine the media focus on that. It can really, I think, produce that kind of democratic culture by empowering the peasants an election date that will be so deeply integrated in their culture, almost like a spring festival. Every year at this time there's a spring festival, and if we can establish every year at this time there's an election, I think that will be a tremendous cultural impact, democratic cultural impact in the countryside, and that's the reason I suggest that. But I don't know. It seems that the government officials have been seriously resisted on the idea of provincial-wide election date. I think they probably would encourage county-wide election date rather than provincial-wide. I don't know what's their rationale, but they don't seem to really like the suggestion. The other thing I think is about this mobilizational style of village elections. I think too much, at the initial stage of village elections, it's okay for government to organize, the rural farmers to participate in this democratic exercise. I think that's fine. But after all these years, I felt that this mobilizational style in some way takes away the initiative of villagers themselves. And also there are a lot of problems associated with this mobilizational style. They give the township officials too much, too much publicity, and in many ways enable them to even interfere, and project their influence into the village elections. And you can see all these red colors and all these township officials introducing the candidates, making all these speeches. So people's attention will focus on these officials rather than the village elections itself. And the other thing is that this is another picture I took in the Jiangxi province when this election officials were chasing villagers to the ponds where this woman was washing her clothes in the pond, the village pond, but they chasing those villagers to give them the ballots. I don't think there's anything wrong if there's a procedural guarantee that these ballots can be counted on later, and those there's a proper voting procedure to take those ballots back. But by taking the ballots like this, it can create a lot of forgeries. In fact, today, one of the most controversial issues about revising the law is that a lot of people wanted to add to the election law the what they call the anti-bribery election law or clause or provisions into law because of this lack of procedural guarantee. I think this is one typical example when you see this official will take the ballots everywhere. The other issue is this roving boxes, because in order to encourage what they call the turnout rates, because officials always wanted to boost their turnout rates, those election workers will take the ballot boxes from family to family to ask them to cast the ballot into the boxes. So these roving boxes became a problem because it's not really safeguarded. Sometimes you can see this is 2 people or 3 people. Sometimes just one person will carry those boxes to get the ballots casted into the box from family to family. What if the people were stuffing the boxes? Right? That created a lot of potential problems. So these are the kind of problems that is procedurally need to be really improved. The other issue, which I will talk a little bit more, is this need to define the power of the village committees vis-a-vis the village party committees. There's no clear law designating the functions and the power of these 2 committees, traditionally important in the Chinese villages election. There's a new development recently to promote what they call the concurrent positions held by one person. In other words, when they elected a village chief, if this village chief is not a party member, they want this village chief to become a party member and to also hold the party committee chair position concurrently. There's a reason for it, which we'll talk about that just in a minute. But I think, a lot of people held this is a creation in China, but I have my own take on this. I think the positive side of this is that now at least the government recognizes that even party chief needs popular base, needs popular support. So that's at least its positive side. But on the other hand, that will give the party too much control by literally combining 2 committees into one person. That did not, I think, bode well for the village self-governance in the Chinese countryside. Well, there's no question, I think, village elections empower the villagers at least every 3 years to select their new leaders. If they don't like it, unlike before, they're stuck with it, at least they can change it. I mean, that's a good thing about these village elections. It also increased rural political participation. We're talking about 300 million people now will regularly cast their votes, participated in this election process. The other thing I think is this democratic institutional creation, which I think is important because this village election as an institution has now created this institutional rules and procedures and norms in the Chinese countryside that will gradually spread this democratic culture. I think this institutional development is something that really a good start to project this democratic practices in the Chinese countryside. Most of these are indeed based on the international standards, particularly those voting procedures. But another meaning of this village election, I think, is that it does create social stability. From the studies I've done, I can see that in those well-elected villagers, the villagers usually will try to entrust their power into the elected officials. So whether they've done a good job or not good job, the villagers will have their own evaluations. So they now turn less to turn their attention to the townships or appeal to the county government. Instead, they will say it is those elected officials that either have done a good job or haven't done a good job. So there's a less village protest in a sense, as unlike before. They usually, if they are not satisfied with the village life, they will take the matter to the higher levels. You don't see that in those well managed and elected villages. Now, what's the impact of village elections? In other words, after all the elections, people ask, so what? I think, if we really need to study the village governance, which now is increasingly, I think, studied by the scholars, and I'm one of them moving from village elections to study village governance. I think there's no simple answer to this. Why? Because if you look at village governance from the point of view of who are in control, whether the village committee chairman or chairwoman or party committee secretary, right? The answer obviously is mixed, because I went to Anhui province 2 years ago and did a study with one of the senior scholars in Anhui, Xin Qiushui. We published a paper. That paper found that in those villagers who have good elections, it seems to most of the villagers were satisfied with the village governance. But in those villages that elections were not well conducted, in other words, there are a lot of controversies about the elections, then the villagers turn to think that the village governance was not much improved. I think partly because of the controversial village outcome, who finally got elected. There are several reasons, I think, associated with this problem of the village governance. One is that a lot of those elected village committees, they generally lack of resources, particularly in recent years when the rural taxes were eliminated. Because before, rural taxes contributed to some of the village income, because some of these taxes collected by the government, they will give back to the village committee for them to use. But now the government totally eliminated rural taxes. By the way, China probably was the last of few countries in the world that still tax their farmers. All the other countries, they gave subsidies, right? But in recent years, they did finally eliminate the taxes. But because of that, that deprived the village committees of their resources to manage village affairs. That's one problem. The other is that we have this fight between the elected village chief and the party committee secretary. In a lot of villages, that the party secretary refused to give power up to the elected officials. For example, in Beijing, near Beijing suburb, there's one party secretary refused to give the elected village chief the village seal. You need a village seal to do businesses, but he refused. He regarded that's his power, and even if he was not elected. Okay, so this, what they call two-committee power wrangling, has been very widely spread. On one hand, you have elected village committees. On the other hand, you have a village party committee. Okay, according to one survey in 6 provinces like Shanxi, Hebei, Shanxi, Fujian, Anhui, and Jilin, you can see that all these percentages of surveyed believe that the two committees are not working together. The highest probably is in Fujian. Well, let's see. In Fujian, about 40% believe that two committees just cannot work together. So that, and in those places, most of the party committees actually will gain upper hand in the end. Why? Because the township government will take side when you have two committees fighting against each other. The township and county government always. Well, there's a reason, because the township government always in the past rely on the party committee to do the work for them at the village level, right? And they still wanted those village party committees, rather than the elected committees, to function like the way they functioned before. Well, there are several factors that explain why there is ineffective village governance by the elected village committees. One is what I call the institutional deficiency. Okay? The institutional deficiency had a lot to do with the law itself, because the law established 3 important organizations at the village level. One is the elected village committees, the other is the village assemblies. The third organization is the village party committee. But the law only defined the functions for the first 2 organizations, that is, village committees, which are supposed to function, to perform a function like administering village public affairs, managing economic development, collect and the collective land and property, and also assist the township governments in fulfilling the state tasks such as birth control or other disaster relief. Usually these are the state tasks that is being imposed to their villages to fulfill. Okay? And that seems to be that it is well-defined on this level. The other is the definition of village assemblies. Usually these are also elected a miniature legislative body at the village level. Their function is basically to approve village income allocations, fundraising for village schools, roads, and other public works, and the village business projects, villages' land contracts, and use of village land. Basically, they have what they call the power of the purse, right, for their village assemblies. Now, what messed up this normal functions of these 2 committees is the third organization, that is the party committee. Okay? Now, the law does not really define village party committee any specific functions, except by saying that the village party committee should exercise what the law said, core leadership. Now, what's core leadership? The law did not define it. And so it is up to the interpretation of the provincial election regulations as well as the county and the township officials to elaborate. So a lot of actually township officials therefore would say the core leadership means that the village party committee should be in control of the other two committees. So because of that, in the actual implementation of the village self-government, the formal institutional structure has never been truly established so that village committees and village assemblies can function as what the law said they should supposed to function. Instead, most of the villages actually still let party committee to call the shot. Okay, so to me that is the what I would call the institutional deficiency. Because of that, we have I have identified 5 types of village government. 5 types. The first type is the village party chairman or chairwoman dominated government model. In this case, really the party chief is the one who actually rules the village, who calls the shot, and the elected VC chair would follow what the party chair does. Now, what's the percentage of this? Who knows, but I think it is widely spread. It is quite widely spread, particularly in the northern part of China. Not so much in a few provinces like Zhejiang province, where actually, because of the relative high level of economic development, actually those elected VC chiefs were bypassing the village party secretary, was making all the decisions. But in most of other areas, I think this model was quite widely spread. The other is the VC chair-dominated government model, where you have a very strong elected chair, or strong-willed chair, who would make all the decisions and bypassing the party secretary. As I said, this occurred in a few provinces, particularly in Zhejiang. In some part of the Guangdong provinces, you also have those rich villages like Shenzhen, for example, near Shenzhen. Those elected village chief control billions of dollars worth of village assets. They really made a lot of decisions, important decisions. The third model is these, what they call the single leadership model, where the power was vested in one person. This is what I just discussed, the concurrent held position, where the VC and the party secretary was one person. So, and this is becoming more and more popular now, this model, because there are more and more villagers that select both the party secretary and the VC chief into one person. The fourth model is what I call dual leadership model, in which you have both a strong party chief and a strong-willed elected village chief. And they try, each one is to call the shot. But in this case, you often have what they call paralysis governing model, because neither of them can actually do the work. Okay? And this can be seen in quite a number of villages, particularly in not so poor villages, but in not so well-to-do villages, kind of middle-level development villages. You will see this kind of dual leadership because you have only fewer resources, and yet, each of these wanted to control those few resources available to them. The last model is this what I call the inaction model, dual inaction model, where either elected chief or the party secretary didn't want to do anything. But they did not, they don't want to do anything, but they do not want the other person to do anything either. So it ended up that both of them didn't do anything. This can be seen in villages where they're relatively poor and not much resources available. So no one really wanted to take up such a job that it was not really awarding to them. So this 5 types of village governance were the most popular ones, I think, widespread to the most of the countryside. The other major factor with regard to the ineffective of the village governance, I think, is the township and county interference. Okay, well, ever since the onset of this village self-government, township officials have been very skeptical about this so-called village self-government. In fact, the surveys show consistently that more than 60% of the township officials believe that it is not time for China to exercise this self-autonomy at the village level. They do not believe the villagers themselves were capable of self-governing. They believe they can only function normally under the leadership of the township. But ironically, the Chinese election law stipulates that the relationship between the township and the village is not of one of leadership. Instead, is one of what they call guidance. So the township governments are supposed to guide his relationship with the villagers rather than control the villagers or give orders to villagers. Township government cannot directly give orders to village committee to do things. So in this case, the township governments have to find different ways to maintain their traditional control over villages. One of those ways is they still use the village party committee as their agent at the village level to carry out township tasks. So that's why when the township government sided with the party committees and supported township village party committees, you can see that that's why in most of these villages that the party secretaries were so dominating because of the township government support. The other is that today, in a lot of villages, village finance now is managed by township government. This is a recent development where they believe if the township can put all the village resources together, then they can have better township development. So they use all kinds of ways to coerce the villages to give their finance management power to the so-called professionals at the township government to manage. Okay? And what happened is that there are a lot of mismanagement occurred of these village funds. Let me give you one example. In Shanxi province, this township government decided to build a huge office building. They built a huge office building with 80 offices, rooms, but they only have 40 employees. So there's another half of these empty rooms. What are you going to do? So instead, the township government asked each village to rent an office as a village liaison in the township. Okay, so in that sense, to make up for the loss of such a project. So there are a lot of mismanagement of the village funds because of this township power. Thirdly is the township government really control, and also the county government control a lot of resources today. Recently, I don't know how many of you had heard the new policy of building what they call a socialist countryside. That's a new development in China. What they're trying to do is that they're trying to boost economy in the countryside by investing a lot of money, building up the roads, building up the infrastructures, building up the new houses to stimulate the consumptions in the countryside. So a lot of these resources are now in the hands of the county and the township governments. So the township governments, therefore, can use those funds to control the villages, saying that if this village listens to this particular county government, they will give you more funds. For example, to build up roads, to build up infrastructure, laying on the power lines, etc. So, and that further boosted township control of the villages. Another one is, again, this wide promotion of Yijian, which is basically the concurrently holding two positions to one person practice, because the township government realized this kind of practice actually helps the township government to exert their control over one person, and particularly if this person held party secretary position, they can use the party discipline, to exert control. But lastly, I think is the macro policy of the state, which, in some ways, it's ironic that in some way it did eliminate the burden, economic burdens of the villagers, tax elimination, land subsidies. Now, if you really farm the land, you get more subsidies to encourage farmers to farm. But on the other hand, it didn't really bode well for village self-government, because it does deprive all these village resources for their village self-government. Now, I actually recently wrote a paper proposing a solution to this impasse on the village governance, incorporating all the traditional three important institutions at the village level, but make different functions for them so that they can at least address some of these problems I discussed. And this triangular model, I guess you're so familiar with. I guess still remember in the old days, I think it was Professor McFarquhar at Harvard used to construct such a model, saying that this is the triangular model that is so stable for the Chinese political institutions for thousands of years. At the very top is the emperor, and then at the bottom is Confucianism, and later communism, and then on the right bottom is the bureaucracy. If you have this kind of three institutions, you can govern China. So I sort of created different kind of institutions, but with this kind of structure, similar structure. Instead, I suggested that we should establish the village assembly or village representative assembly, VRA, as a supreme body of the village governance that will act as a miniature legislature to approve village charters or revise village charters, village regulations, but also act as a power of purse to approve the village budgeting and funds allocation. At the same time, supervising the work of the elected village committees. So in this case, village committees will carry out the executive function of management. They will manage the specific, the works for the villages. And that left the village party committee, which we cannot ignore. We can wish them to go away, but they're not going to go away. So you have to deal with it. So the way I think we can deal with this is to incorporate the village party committee into a role of supervision, to ask the village committee to exercise the kind of moral leadership, saying that if you can supervise the work of the village committee in a sense that, whether through either disciplinary or recall mechanism, that the village party committee can work as either a disciplinary committee under the village assembly or as a separate supervision institution, but they can recommend recall or certain discipline against corrupted elected officials by working within the village assembly by power of recommendation. It shouldn't have a power to really ensure the recall or punishment, but instead it has to work through the village representative committee or village assembly to carry out their supervision power. So in that sense, village party committee can exercise that kind of moral leadership, since the law designated they should exercise the core leadership function. Well, you know, in the recent revision of the village law, actually there are heated discussions on the function of the village party committees. There are all sorts of suggestions, recommendations. But despite all these these policy recommendation studies, I do not necessarily think that the government, the Chinese government, will reduce the function of the party committee. I think they just want to find out a more acceptable way for the villagers, you know, to let this party committee to play a key role in the village self-government. We'll see how this revision of the organic law will come out, but that is the latest development. I think that's the end of my my talk, and I'll be happy to open up the floor and entertain any questions. So for any one who has questions, could you come to the mic for the recording purposes?
Two things. Do the village committees, do the people who vote or participate in it, are they members of the party? Are they required to be members of the party?
No, no. Any villagers who are qualified for the voter status, such as at the age of 18, you have to have the residence in the village, can vote, provided you register.
I understand there is a more democratizing at the People's Parliament, even at the township level. Could you discuss that a little bit?
I'll be very happy to talk about that. Actually, I was actually the student who participated in the 1979-1980 student running for the National People's Congress. That was the first time that students self-initiated such a campaign to run for the people's representative. And ever since then, now at the township and district level, the National People's Congress candidates can be self-initiated. It no longer have to be nominated by the party or by any organizations. At this level, there are more self-initiated campaigns. So the nomination, almost like the village election nomination, were not controlled by the party or by the government. Anyone who wished to run actually can nominate themselves to run for the representative at the lowest level of the People's Congress. You know, the Chinese National People's Congress election was indirect election. Only at the very lower level, at the district and township and county level, there is a direct election. That is, the voters will directly elect the representatives to the county, township level People's Congress. Then the higher level People's Congress will be elected by the lower level elected representatives. From then on, it is indirect election. It was no longer direct election.
But everyone has to be a member of the party.
No, no, you don't have to be a member of the party. Yes?
After 1980, when they got rid of the communes and everything, were they afraid there would be like unrest in the countryside if they hadn't, you know, organized? And is there more autonomy in the city than in the countryside?
Well, you know, one of the key reasons for Deng Xiaoping to decide to dismantle the commune system was for economic reasons. Obviously, the commune system was not producing what you know, Mao believed to produce. And in fact, at the end of the Cultural Revolution, a lot of these communes were not even functioning as an economic unit. People produce more in their private plot than you know, the commune land. So apparently, the commune experiment failed because it just did not produce incentives for farmers to produce. I think that's the reason why Deng Xiaoping wanted to dismantle the commune system. So when they did that, apparently the administrative policy was not followed. So instead of re-establishing a grassroots level government, the commune system, after it was eliminated, there is no other administrative structure set up. And that did create a lot of problems in the countryside in terms of village governance. You know, as I mentioned, in that the first election village I visited, I was told that during the absence of the commune government, villagers were engaging gambling, fighting. There are a lot of stealing. There are a lot of people coming from outside the county into this particular place because this place was at the juncture of 3 counties. So no one will bother to manage those village affairs. You know, it was a chaotic situation. So that, to me, was obviously the direct outcome of this decommunization. So because of that, some villages decided to initiate village self-governance by electing their own representatives and forming their own village government. Usually they call it village committees. Charlotte?
I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how people campaign, either at the village or the township assembly level, and what role money plays in an election.
Very important, actually. Let me give you a personal anecdote. Actually, Tom Freeman was with us. Yeah, and we were observing a village election in Liaoning province. So this one young person who nominated himself and wanted to run against incumbent, who was actually a party secretary. Right? Then we interviewed him, asked him why he wanted to run for election. And he told us, he said he was a rich person in the village. I asked him how did he get rich. He said he was making tofu. So he became a tofu-making king in the village and sold a lot of tofu, apparently, became first Wan Yuan Hu in the village, you know, meaning that Wan Yuan Hu is a term referring to these earlier rich entrepreneurs in China. And he said he wanted to pass his skill to the whole villages to make sure that all the villages will become just as rich as he was. You know, so that's why that he wanted to run for the election. Actually, Tom Freeman immediately took the story and wrote an op piece in New York Times the next day about this particular guy who was a tofu-making king who actually successfully ran the election and won. So apparently, there are a lot of economic reasons. In fact, if you hear those campaign speeches in those elections, most of these campaign speeches are very practical promises, and there's no high-sounding words. Most of these candidates were telling the villagers, saying that this is what we need to fix, and this is what my skill was, and what I can do. You know, it's a very concrete kind of campaign platform that often actually won the support of the voters. Now, the role of money in the campaign was also a very interesting issue because the government did not have campaign funds. The law did not actually stipulate how the campaign funds should be raised and used. So instead, there are all kinds of ways for the candidates to make innovations. So there's one incident in Jiangxi province when the one candidate who actually left the village in the early time and became rich elsewhere, you know, by engaging some entrepreneurial businesses, and came back and decided to run for the village election. So he hired a military truck and equipped the truck with 4 loudspeakers. And then he just run this truck every day broadcasting his campaign speech. And eventually that became a case study for the regulators, the Ministry of Civil Affairs, and saying, whether this guy should really use that huge loudspeakers to run for the election. So, there are a lot of this kind of innovative campaigns in China. And later, actually, the money became more and more important because some candidates simply just distribute a little red envelope in which they contain some money and gave to the voters, in exchange for votes. So you do have this actually happened in Shanxi province, for example. Some candidates has distributed as many as 5 million yuan to the voters. 5 million yuan, that is now close to, $800,000. So that's why this bribery issue has become an election issue in this newly revision draft. Yes?
Very interesting parallels with the United States, although we don't bribe our voters. You mentioned that the party committee at a village level cannot nominate someone. Is it the case in a village? I'm curious about this because in the United States, often we have candidates, very capable candidates, who will not challenge an incumbent or will not challenge what everyone thinks is the party's person. Does that happen in China, where a candidate who might nominate himself or have others nominate them challenge an incumbent that everyone thinks, well, that's the party's person, we'll just vote for them?
Yes. In some provinces where I observed, particularly in villages where there are resources to be used by the elected officials, you see very competitive elections. You see the young candidates would rise up and run for the elder established party secretaries and incumbents. In those economic well-to-do provinces and villages, this case is more often than in those resource-poor villages. And also, there is another factor, actually, that I think is relevant to your question. That is, in some villages where you see a big clan, or kinship residents, if the incumbent is from this particular clan, then you don't see many challengers from the smaller clans or other type of kinships to rise up to challenge this particular person. So I do think the clan or kinship issue also plays a very important role in considering, who is going to run or who is not going to run. Yes.
How are the
Can you speak into
village committees, how are they paid? Or you speak of the resource-rich areas and the resource-poor. So there isn't money coming down to the province, or how does that work?
Yeah. Generally speaking, as I said, the elected village chiefs, they are not government employees. They are not government officials. So they are not on the government payroll. So in a lot of villages, these elected officials will get what they call subsidies, either from the village funds, in those villages where they have village enterprises, so they have a village income, then they will subsidize those elected officials. In places where villages do not have any resources, township governments will subsidize the elected officials. So there are no uniform pay practices for the elected officials. It depends on the village economies, and it depends on the village relations with the township government. In recent years, there are some provinces that try to, especially the rich provinces, that actually try to put those elected village officials on the payroll of township government, if the township government have enough money to do that, because they realize they still have to rely on those village organizations to carry out the township works. So that's the I guess is widely practiced payroll for the elected officials in recent years.
Did you say the local party officials were also elected?
Can you repeat your question again?
Did you say that the local village party representative, party chairman, was also elected?
Yes. This concurrently holding two positions to one person practice is in recent years led to a new practice, that is to have village party secretary also to be elected. But they were elected not by the villagers. They had to be elected by the village party members. So what happened is that if you are elected as the village party, committee chief, but if you are not the party member, then the township government will try to recruit you into the party, then subject you to the village party members' election. If you are elected, so you will become both the village party chief and the village committee chief. Okay. So this is actually a new development. I think it's a positive development because now all these used to be appointed village party chiefs have to face villagers, to have certain village opinion, subject to the village opinion polls before they become the party secretaries.
So would that tend to stabilize the system? Make the democratic movement stronger?
I think it can be both ways. I think on one hand that those, is good that the party officials are elected rather than appointed. But on the other hand, the election of the party secretary, by combining these two positions together, you have to ask this particular person to which position you are more accountable or responsible for. Right? Do you primarily act as a party secretary, or you primarily act as an elected village committee chief? And I think this will be a good study, really, academic study, to show I think a lot of surveys and field studies, research need to be done on this to see actually how these people who are holding two positions together actually perform in terms of village governance. Thank you for that question, actually. It's a very good one. Yes?
My question is, what do they do?
What?
Who do they have? Do they control police folks? Do they clean the streets, pick up garbage, education? What are the...
Yes. Let me give you actually, let's see. That's, let me show you this picture here. Well, first of all, police station is not established at the village level. Usually it's at the county level. So the village chief did not have any police power in that sense. But the village committee has a lot of things to do in terms of developing a village economy, managing village public welfare, And for example, you can see this sanitation environment, this is the work for the usually for the village committee to really tell the villagers how to make a village environment improve and better. And the other thing is the public work. For example, if this village needs to build or improve established irrigation system where they need the water to farm, right, for individual farmers, that is the work for the village committees. Another thing that the village committee, for example, to carry out the township or state task is birth control policy. So it is up to the village committee chair to make sure that all the villagers in the village will adhere to the one-child birth policy. Right? Conscription, for example, is another thing when the state wanted to, want to have new army conscription. They would actually issue the quota to the township. Then the township will ask the village committees to recommend the young people to the township government for the army screening. Okay. So there are, and if the two families got into fight or clan clashes, it is again the village committees to mediate and solve those issues. So these are the kind of real life issues, concerning every villager. So that's the kind of work usually the village committees would do.
Let's just make this our last question because we have to vacate the room by 6 o'clock.
Sure, go ahead.
I don't know whether this is directly related or not, but the young people that we have met, especially in Shanghai, are not at all interested in the party. They're just not joining it and they're not interested. And I wonder if there's a similar trend in the villages, and if there is, what kind of a shift is this liable to make in what's happening in the villages?
This is, when we talk about this party development in China, it's a very interesting, actually, phenomenon. You see both trends. On one hand, a lot of young people, particularly college students, who wanted to actually join the party, and so that they can, which will pave the way for their political career or any kind of a career to be a party member. You have advantage of. But on the other hand, you do see a lot of young people went into businesses, and they don't really, necessarily care about the party membership. But in the countryside, generally speaking, young people, they are not interested in staying in the village, period. They all wanted to go to big cities, to find a job in the big cities. So, in fact, you see there's succession problem in terms of party membership in the countryside. And a lot of these party cadres and officials were middle-aged or senior-aged people. You do have problems. So to solve this, actually, in recent years, there's a new policy that the party or the government calls on college graduate students to go down to the countryside to work as a village official and establish their career there. And once they accomplish something, they can get promoted back to the cities. So that's one way to make sure that the party work will have the new people, new blood to carry on those works. So this is, these college students, as an experiment to act like a village officials, I think is yielding limited successes. You saw reports that some of these college students were really able to use their knowledge to enrich and better the village life. But the problem, again, I think, is that how are you going to keep those talents in the countryside? I'm sure a lot of these young students they went there as a springboard, for advancing their own careers back in the cities rather than permanently stay in the countryside.
Well, I want to thank Professor Tan. I have a feeling this could go on for quite some time, but as I say, we have to vacate the building. But I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank you for such a fine talk.
Thank you for coming.